yes, we know that in general, young people are more disaffected by religion than in past generations. But the ones who are faith-filled are very vibrant in their faith, and we can look at, for example, the pro-life movement is abounding with young people and young energy. We can think about Latin America too. It's a continent where there's so much vitality in the faith. So I think bolstering where the faith is strong and going well, I think there does have to be some healing. I think we have to look to more, perhaps more effective, as I mentioned before, systems of governance in the church. And seeking to, again, continue the new evangelization which Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict initiated and Pope Benedict continued. That is, looking to rebuild the principles of our faith in those parts of the world where Christianity has been long established but is now beginning to wane, that we renew and re-energize building those principles of the faith. And also to look to parts of the world where Christianity is not so long established but is thriving. Latin America and Africa come to mind, that we find ways to make the church even more vibrant to be able to communicate to people in those parts of the world.
Janice Wright with KCBS. Do you think the Catholic Church might be sending a message, a bigger message, that the seats of power are perhaps no longer in the United States, no longer in Europe, that generally speaking, we should be looking to places like Africa and South America?
This is something that many commentators and analysts have been saying for some time, and some of us have been aware of the growth of the church more in the southern hemisphere. It does seem to be that there's a lot of power for renewal of the church coming from those parts of the world. So I think we will feel more of that effect going forward now.
But even for non-Catholics, just as far as places of power in the world.
Oh, I
not
see, in
so much
terms of
European
geopolitics?
Geopolitics, yes, geopolitics. Thank you.
Yes, well, we can think of the emerging economies. That's a little bit out of my league, but I think we do have to be paying attention to those emerging nations.
I talked to one Latin American Catholic outside the church who is concerned about whether this pope will actually be widely accepted within the church, because he is from what's been considered outside.
I don't think that will be a problem. I don't think anyone in the Catholic family would have a problem accepting a pope, no matter where he came from.
You remarked about your surprise that he is a Jesuit. Why? What's the surprise? What does that bring to the church? There's
always been this idea and that Jesuit would never be elected the pope because their special charism, we call it, their special mission is a particular fidelity to the pope and strengthening his teaching office. So we'd always thought that it would be unusual for a Jesuit to be elected, but not impossible. Nothing ruled it out, but just it never was. There was always kind of this idea that a Jesuit wouldn't be assume that office because of their special mission to support the teaching office of the pope.
You talked about, I'm Elaine from St. Paul Daily, and you talked about how like the Latin America and Africa have been like a growing Catholic churches. And what about in Asia and China specifically? How does the new pope is going to connect with those in Asia?
I'm sure the new pope will try to find his ways to connect with everyone. And there are certainly parts of Asia where the church is growing as well. Of course, the Philippines is still a very Catholic culture, and the church is very strong there. But also there are certain other parts of Asia as well. South Korea comes to mind as one place in particular where the church is growing. I think it will probably take him some time to, get to know the lay of the land. I know that just coming to the Archdiocese of San Francisco. In these three counties, it takes time to get to know who the people are, where they're at, what their strengths are, and who's good at doing what. So certainly to assume the office of Pope and looking with a very universal vision, it will take him some time. But I'm sure he will, as he goes along with his advisors, learn how to communicate effectively to people of different cultures in the way that is effective in those cultures.
I didn't understand what you meant about the Jesuit thing. I'm not a Catholic, so I don't understand. You said because they are charged with the teachings of the church, they normally wouldn't be thought of to be Pope material?
To be honest, I've never quite thoroughly understood it myself.
Okay.
But the thinking that I've heard when people would mention this is that they have a special mission to support the Pope in his teaching office. So they have a very long preparation with a very extensive education, and they're very strong educators with universities and high schools especially. So because of this special connection they have to supporting the Pope, it wasn't thought that one of them would actually assume that role. That was the way I've understood it, but as I said, it certainly didn't rule out that might happen.
So he's the first Jesuit?
He's the first Jesuit, yes.
Along with the idea of the election of the Pope, and one of the interesting quotes I heard last weekend from somebody when I was watching something about the elections was that the hope is that in the process of the balloting, that they would find somebody within the group that before hadn't been considered, that they would be led that way in some divine fashion. Do you think that as I've heard before today, that this was not one of the people that was expected, just like you mentioned being a Jesuit, but not one of the people was expected, but also a surprise that they would be led in that direction?
A surprise to the Cardinals?
Well,
Or-
yeah, a surprise that he wasn't one of the people expected to be.
Well, we don't know what the Cardinals were saying to each other during those general congregations before the conclave and informal times at meals and during breaks. But there is, something that happened. Something must have surfaced along that line. And maybe they were surprised even among themselves. Maybe not. There were probably, I would imagine there were some who had him in mind. Otherwise, he wouldn't have surfaced. And he certainly was speculated in the last conclave as being, as they say, a papabile, someone who could have been qualified. But I think the Cardinals being able to discuss this among themselves without any outside influence and just focus on each other, learning from each other, understanding the pooled wisdom. Maybe some of them were maybe initially surprised, but if you've ever been in a process like that, an idea comes up that you hadn't thought of, and at first you're not quite sure, and then the more you think about it, the more it makes sense, and then other people chime in and they bring their own unique perspective, and things begin to make sense, and the pieces begin to fit together. I would guess it was something like that.
Can you talk about your joy and the emotion that goes along with, first of all, seeing the smoke and realizing you're going to have a new leader and in time for Holy Week and someone to, as you said, shepherd the church?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's certainly the anticipation of it is very palpable, and I know especially for the people in the square, as they were awaiting the smoke and then to see the white smoke come out. Having experienced that myself, I was in the square when Pope John Paul II was elected, so I remember that the rush of the joy and the anticipation, and just the anticipation of who it would be. So there's a lot of strong emotions at the time, but also I felt a certain sense of peace that the church is in the hands of the Holy Spirit, and whoever the next Pope would be, the Spirit will work through him to guide the church to where the church needs to be. So there was a lot of excitement and anticipation, but also at a deeper level, a sense of peace and calm.
Can I ask about your anticipation then for what Pope Francis will bring to the church now? You talk about your anticipation about his election. Now, what is your anticipation or your hope for what happens next?
It's a bit of a hard question to answer because I don't know him that well, but I would hope that the priorities that the church has set, I'm sure he will continue, and I would hope that he continues to do so effectively, the new evangelization being the top priority to imbue our society with the truths of the gospel so that we can have a society of justice and peace, and one where we can all understand the true good that God has in store for us. I would expect that I know he will continue that project, and I would look to him for his wisdom and his leadership in finding new ways to do that.
We have one more question, and then we'll change the format a bit.